Can exercise reduce stress? And if so, how? And why do some people find exercise stressful? Today, I'm talking to personal trainer Rochelle Butler about this very subject. She's going to help us understand it much better than I do. But before that, I'm going to ask her what stresses her out on a day-to-day basis.
Hi, Tricia. Thanks for having me on. What stresses me out on a daily basis? I was thinking about this on the way here, and actually it ends up often being related to time and time pressured. And the best example, actually, I was trying to think of my own, but the best example was in fact a client who experienced a similar thing yesterday. On her way to me, we had a session booked for 11. She woke up in the morning, her son who was staying with her suddenly threw in her curveball, said, Mom, you've got to take me to go and pick up my car. She's all right, factored that in. On the way back from that, it made her late getting home to change to come to me. I get a text from her saying, sorry, this is my son, I'm running late, I'll be with you shortly. Just before she leaves the house, she texts me, she says, right, I'm on my way, I'll be with you in 10 minutes. 5 minutes into her journey, texts me again, I just hit the A3 and there's traffic, and the spiral of, oh my word, and it's all those, that's the kind of thing that kind of gets me, and I think most people, it's those things that are, you just kind of knock you off your plan, and you go, okay, I can deal with that, and then you get into a spin, because, and I could see with her, bless her, she kept thinking, this is all a reflection on me. It was nothing, I had my day planned, and now all these external factors, which aren't in my control, are now a reflection, and a bad reflection on me. Obviously, we sorted it out, it was okay, and all of that. But it's those kind of things, that where you, where you've planned and you've taken into account every eventuality, and then something else happens and you sort of deal with it, and then there's that snowball effect. And it's that double whammy of knowing it's silly and it's out of your control, but getting stressy about it. So I think that's kind of day-to-day thing.
I think that's something that happens to us all, isn't it? But what's great about the story is that she's the kind of person that normally builds in contingency for such eventualities. B, there are days where it's just determined to put you off center, but she took the trouble to call you and keep you informed.
Well, and then it works the other way, right? Because then I'm thinking, gosh, I can see she's stressed and panicky. So I need to convey to her, look, it's okay, get you when you get here. But at the same time, I need to say to her, but I need to finish on time because I've got some. So then I'm like withholding that information because don't want to add extra pressure to her. Yeah. Anyway, it's sorted out, but you're right. It's sorted out. I think most women in general kind of men are much better at going, look, none of this was my fault. It just is what it is. Whereas women try to, I'll try to make it better. Okay, I'll try to sort it out. In fact, her husband or the father might have said to the boy, sorry, I don't have time to take you, make another plan, whereas I think women tend to do that. Oh, okay, I'll sort it out for you. I'll help, which kind of works against you sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes saying yes to things that need a no is the thing, isn't it? Something that I found really helpful as well, because I like to be on time. I don't like to let people down. But, the traffic problem, if I always leave early to account for the traffic problem and an accident as well. But sometimes it's still not enough time. And I have learned over the years to just know, well, there is absolutely nothing I can do. I may as well just be chilled. Yeah. It's gonna just be easier on me. It makes no difference to the journey apart from making it more pleasant if I'm chilled about it. And that's quite nice to be able to do that rather than be all jittery and angsty about it.
I find I've changed. I've made a plan of changing the wording or how I was going to say how I apologize, but actually don't apologize. So apologize that I'm going to be, in that instance, apologize that I'm going to be late, but not that for what's happened, because that's not my fault. So it's wording your text, for instance, or your statement like, there's traffic, I left on time, and not sort of in a mean way, but just kind of stating the fact that, look, I did what I could do.
Yeah.
Instead of coming at it with I'm so sorry, there's, and I think sometimes you do that, you calm yourself down too, because you just go, look, any reasonable person would have been caught in this. This isn't my failing,
Yeah, exactly. So not personalizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's talk about exercise. So what has it got to do with stress?
Well, it's a funny one, exercise, because it's often linked. When I say exercise, I also just mean movement, because exercise can be, from your just walking the dog, walking to the end of the garden and back to, a 2-hour cycle. So when I say exercise, I mean movement just in general is often cited as a stress management tool. But equally, exercise can also be perceived or received by the body as a stress. So it's like most things in life, there's a balance to be achieved. And some people find that balance perfectly, and sometimes you don't. But equally, some people go the whole, well, that's too stressful, I'm not going to do that, and kind of hover in this end of the spectrum where they do enough that all the really passive exercises. And women got quite guilty of this, getting caught up in just doing. And listen, I encourage my clients to do yoga, Pilates, all the, if you're thinking mat-based stuff, the more passive exercises. By that, I mean not massively cardio, but a lot of women can get stuck in just doing that, because the slightly more cardio exercise, and it doesn't have to be running, jogging, that kind of thing, but the slightly more fast-paced exercise can be seen as too much hard work. So people sometimes women particularly tend to hover over here, never really push themselves. And then that not staying in that comfort zone means that, particularly when you're using exercise for weight management, isn't really going to have an effect. And for stress management, absolutely will, but also in itself can get boring or stagnant. So by way of stress management, exercise is fantastic. But I would always say to vary it, yeah. Particularly outdoors, indoors, intensity, group exercise, if you like that, one-to-one. It's all about knowing what you enjoy. I mean, one of the things particularly about I have a studio. I'm here at my studio today, but whenever we can, when the weather's good like today, we take it outdoors, because there's simple things like being outdoors and having that extended eye line, the horizon being over there, is said to have a calming effect that kind of comes back down. They talk about that sort of real primitive brain, that when you're in a closed environment like this, the cues are everything's close, watch out for danger, look around, be careful. But when you've got space and openness, you kind of feel safe because you can see all around you. So that's why things like golf are so kind of relaxing. Anything outdoors tends to be really, really good and relaxing. So if you were going for exercise by way of stress management, when there's a lot of anxiety and that kind of tension, that sort of thing, the outdoors, I'd always recommend outdoors, and sort of the more calming exercises and workouts that deal with breathing. So yoga particularly, but the type of yoga that deals with the breathing, focuses on the breathing. And then the other extreme, of course, not the other extreme, but the other end of that, exercise for stress management. Short, sharp, intense bursts of energy can be really good at just burning off that excess adrenaline, that agitation, that irritation. But exercise should never get to the point where it's exhaustive, like high-end endurance exercise, really, really exhaustive, because that will then be perceived as a stress by the body, and your body will respond physiologically in the same way that it does to any other perceived stress. So it's finding that balance. And I see with a lot of the executives that I work with, who are very, A-type personality, go, 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 go. Quite often in the session, what I'm doing, I don't tell them, because if you tell them we're doing a kind of slowed down, calmer session, that's not, when they come in, they'll be knackered, haven't slept, deadlines, but they want to do a hard session. They want to get the best time. They're chasing their last. And I sort of sneak in a kind of calmer session just to sort of tone it down. And for that kind of person, HIIT, which you may have heard of, high intensity interval training, which is short, sharp bursts of intensity in a concentrated time, is time efficient, but also just burns off that excess energy. But not everybody can muster that level of energy for that. So it's finding what's good for you. And sometimes if you're really, really at the other end of the spectrum, where that's all you can manage, which is a walk around the garden or just through the woods, that's fine. But always be looking to slowly just improve a little bit, challenge yourself a bit more, build up the energy, and then slowly that comes.
I love what you're saying there, Rochelle. So I hadn't thought, but I completely get what you're saying about having the horizon out there is very calming, and being in an enclosed space is quite, it kind of triggers the fight or flight, doesn't it?
It's a real, and the worst thing about this, one of my big bugbears, is any hotel you go to will always put the gym in the basement. I mean, unless they've made a real feature of it, like the top floor where you're overlooking the city or something like that. But quite often it's the forgotten space. You know, it's like, well, we need to have a gym to get our 5-star criteria or whatever. And it'll be high tech, but it'll be no natural light. There'll be no windows. And you know, it's great. And but even here, we're in my studio, we have the windows, you can look out, but whenever you can, take it outdoors. The other thing is machines are great, and particularly when you want to focus on a specific muscle movement, action, strengthening, sculpting in a certain area. But you know, for most people, and the people I work with, because I'm not working with top level athletes, is we're all after functional movement, right? At the end of the day, you want to be able to bend down to put your socks on. So, you know, we can make you fit enough to run a marathon. Great. We can make you strong enough to lift, you know, your body weight. But at the end of the day, as if you can't bend, if there's no flexibility, or there's no energy enough to get up and get on with your day, then what's the point? So I like to focus on the exercise that we do on bringing it into real life. So a lot of the time with clients, when they're going on holiday, you know, I talk about, I don't often give them a workout to say do it in the gym, because there'll always be access to a gym. I say, you know, go for a run on the beach, because you're never going to be able to simulate that kind of ground around here. Or, and that's different from running on a treadmill, for instance. You know, treadmill, the ground moves for you. In real life, that doesn't happen, you know. So yes, definitely outdoors. And what's interesting with my outdoor group session that I do, we go throughout the entire year, winter, rain, hail, sleet or snow, we're outdoors. And some days that's really hard, particularly in the cold, particularly when it's wet. But what's good about that is you come in and you go, wow, I would never have gone outside today had it not been for that exercise session. And I feel alive, you know, the cold, fresh air.
Yeah, exhilarating.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's a real movement at the moment for wild swimming, isn't there? And I suppose that's a similar thing. But to me, what you're saying sounds a lot more civilized.
Yeah, I'm not a great swimmer, but yeah, open water swimming freaks me out a little bit. If I can't see the bottom, then I get a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's, you know, that's not the only thing you can do outdoors, you know. And people also seem to discount quite often the simple things. You know, it doesn't have to. That's why I said before, it's about movement. You know, some days it's just about, I've got clients who could easily run a 10K every day, right? But some days you just need to go for a 5K walk with the dog, you know, at a slow pace, you stop. It doesn't always have to be a massive workout. Sometimes it's just about getting those steps in. And that can be running, walking, cycling. I mean, I like cycling, but I'm not my husband's really into road cycling. He does a lot of tours and events and trips like that. I like cycling, but I literally like the cycling with, you know, the basket, the baguette in the baguette in the basket, and cycling along a river. That for me, and I'll go all day with that kind of cycling, you know. So it's really about tweaking what works for you.
Yeah. So I've got a morning routine that sounds a bit too calm from what you're saying, but it really works for me. It just takes about 15 minutes, and I do it practically every day. It's very rare that I don't do it. And I walk the dog, but I'm not really getting the cardio. And I realize when I'm walking the dog, I'm sauntering.
That's the tricky, yeah. With that's the other thing about training with somebody, is sometimes you can get to the point where you kind of match so in your case, the dog, you kind of match his pace. But in your case, what's quite nice about that's a routine you've got. It gets you up, it starts you for the day, and that's a good 15 minutes. You know, that's how long it takes. So play with that, stick with what works for that, which is A, I get the dog walked, and B, 15 minutes, I can factor that into my day. So all you have to do now to tweak it is make it a little bit more intense in that 15 minutes. So include hills, maybe stop and do press ups if if there's a bench or something like that.
That's my morning routine.
Well, there we go. So you just don't, it doesn't have to be structured into a massive way like that. You know, you've got to take what works for you. So in that case, like I said, it was the 15 minutes and the dog walk. Those two things have to get done. In that's your parameters there, and then play around with that.
You know what I used to do, and I don't know why I've stopped. I think because I enjoy the calm of the walk. My job is very stressful, so I realize I'm doing a lot of calming things. If I were to play some pacey music, then that would encourage a faster pace. You know, for when he's off the lead, there's no reason for me to saunter.
Are you comfortable? Because I don't like running with music, but if that's something you like, then again,
Yeah.
yes. Because
Yeah.
it's all of that. There's so many great classes. I mean, I've got a client who's doing walking netball. She's an elderly lady. I mean, there's anything you can think of doing, there's a class for it. You know, you can take your baby to an outdoor class. There's all sorts of things. You've just got to find what works for you. And fundamentally, it comes down to a few things. Are you happy to exercise in a group? Not everybody is. Not everybody likes a group environment. They either feel intimidated, or they feel it slows them down. They don't like the structure of it. So that's a good place to start. Do I like a group or not? If you like exercising in a group, then seek that sort of thing out. If not, then your other options are either training by yourself, using an app, using a trainer. Think about, most people will tell you when you ask them why do you want to start exercising? And people say, well, I think I ought to for my health, but quite often it's weight management. But within that, you got to go, right, but I do have a knee issue, so I can't run. And you start kind of knocking out what the possibilities are, but always it should come down to, but what do I enjoy doing?
Exactly.
But most people say to me, what's the best exercise? And it's the one you're going to do, to be honest. It's the one you're going to do. Yes, there'll be, if your aim is to lose weight or to run 10K, for instance, if your goal is to run 10K, unfortunately, you are going to have to run during the training for that. But if your goal is just weight loss, we don't have to use running. There are other ways. So you've got to find, it's got to be enjoyment. And look, there are going to be days, I mean, I don't wake up every morning and go, yay, exercise. It's not like that. Some days you're like, oh, this again. But there's always got to be something that you get out of it. And because that's going to be the pull. Whether it be the social element, whether it be the, oh, I love the feeling afterwards, whether it be just sheer vanity of, oh my gosh, I've got to keep my abs in shape. You've just got to find what works for you.
I think that's a really important point, because I don't love exercise, but I do love how exercise makes me feel once it's done. And that's why I'm quite good at doing it.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people wait until they feel motivated to do it, and when they're in the right mood. And of course, that really hardly ever happens until maybe they're motivated because they put on so much weight and now they've got a lot of weight to lose or whatever. So consistency is quite important as well, isn't it?
Well, yes. And also you've got to remember, when you talk about don't feel the energy or motivated, the irony is that sometimes that's not just a case of willpower or attitude. I mean, stress in itself, and I'm sure perhaps you've touched on this in your series, is the cortisol hormone, the stress hormone is released. And that hormone, so firstly, what I like to explain to people is that stress can be mental, emotional, physical. So mental, emotional is the ones you understand: grief, divorce, separation, pressures from work, that kind of, those are the typical stresses which we understand. But then there's also the physical stresses like illness, chronic illness, and exercise can be a stress. But the thing about the different stresses, firstly, they're unique. So what I may find stressful, you may not, you may take in your stride. But what's interesting to note is the body responds physiologically the same way. It doesn't go, oh, this is only a divorce, it'll be over in a few weeks, don't worry, or she's leaving this job, so don't worry about, you don't have to. If it's stressful for you, it's stressful for you. The body doesn't differentiate between different type of stress. It responds the same way, which is to release cortisol. And cortisol, the hormone, and so that's where I come back to, it's not necessarily just about a case of pulling yourself together or get your attitude right, is by default, cortisol kind of is energy conserving, because it's the brain has gone, this is a constant stress. I need to go into survival mode, conserve energy just to be able to deal with this stress. So for a start, if you're super stressful, for instance, you're not going to fall pregnant because your body goes, well, I do not have the energy to raise, to grow another human being. Not going to happen. Why would you now suddenly be motivated to go and run 5K? Because your body's thinking, no, energy expenditure, can't do that. Inevitably, you're not sleeping. So anyway, it's a vicious cycle. So stress is a big, and then on top of that, cortisol places, it lays down fat, particularly around the waist and tummy area. So you're driven by this. I have no energy, but oh my word, I'm putting on weight, blah blah. And then you're craving carbohydrate rich foods, which are then weight gain. So it's this vicious cycle. So quite often when I've started training people, I've actually said, right, I've actually before told people that's too much. Let's do this in the sessions with me, and then during our sessions apart, just go for a walk or just do this. So I think sometimes people are too hard on themselves. We've got this like no pain, no gain attitude, which kind of came out of the 80s or whatever it was. But then, like I said at the start of our call, is be careful that you don't just sit in that space where it's, oh, well, this is all that I can manage, because that then becomes too comfortable, right?
It's a balance, isn't it? Because there are some people who've got chronic fatigue syndrome for whom exercise would be a no-no. And I've got people who suffer from eating disorders and they are addicted to exercise, and it's part of the eating disorder, and trying to get them to rush.
Well, that's interesting. You're right. I've worked with people with eating disorders, and it's very interesting because you realize how much of a mental issue that is, because you've got to be so careful when I work with people like that about any comment I make. And obviously it's usually positive, but if I say something like, wow, the tone in your, really, is it? They become overly obsessed with things you say. So you've got to be careful not to draw attention to certain things. I've also worked with, I currently work with somebody who has chronic fatigue. And interestingly enough, and I quite often find this, when people exercise out of, because it's motivated by a health related thing, the attitude and motivation is massive. So somebody with chronic fatigue, and I can see some days she just can't do it, or she'll send me a text, I'm really sorry, Rochelle, I couldn't, and we have that set up because we know that's part of the thing. But she gives her all at those sessions, she's 100% committed, versus somebody, and that's the classic thing, right? When you have it all at your disposal, you're kind of like, another day, I'll do it when I can. And when suddenly you can't, you kind of take it where you can, So it's
of course there are informal forms of exercise as well, aren't there? Like dancing is exercise.
Absolutely.
And fun. And gardening is a really beautiful exercise to do and great for mental health as well. And even things like washing the car or cleaning the house are all things that we have to do. Well, we don't have to, but hopefully
but a part of the daily.
That are great things to keep us active.
Absolutely. The one that always used to use as an example was the cleaning your house, and it's terrible because it just makes you think like you're going to jump out of bed and go, yay, let's clean my house. But there's very often you can find physicality in any exercise that you do, and it's those simple things. And I think what's the beauty about the pandemic is people discovered the necessity for movement and exercise for stopping my joints from stiffening up rather than just for weight management. And the other thing about the pandemic is everybody got walking, and you suddenly realize, it only takes me 5 minutes to walk down to the shop. Why was I driving before, And it's those are the easiest ways. If you build in that cycle to work thing, get off a tube station earlier, take the stairs instead of the lift, those kind of things. They really do. It's cumulative. It really does make a difference.
All adds up. Okay. Sorry, you were going to just say something?
No, I was going to say, sorry, the other thing about stress management, which is often cited, is being mindful and being present and in the moment.
Yeah.
And one of the other things about exercise, particularly if you're doing a weight session, or actually whatever you're doing, because you're focusing on, like, for instance, if you're following a class or whatever, your mind is focused on, what am I doing now? That is a kind of mindfulness in itself. It's you're focused, you're present, you're there for that hour, 20 minutes, whatever it is. So there too, it's a form of mindfulness, that's where it comes into stress management too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay. So I always ask my guests if they've got a book that they've read that they found inspiring or helpful, to see if other people might find the same. But actually, Rochelle has got something a little bit different, haven't you, Rochelle?
Yes. Well, I'm reading books all here and there, but I thought the one to share, which would be more interesting, is I follow TED Talks, and they're on all social media sites. But TED Talks are those mini lectures, and sometimes they're from really well-known people, but often it's just from regular people. And the topics can be from finance to environmental causes to whatever. But more recently, I discovered this one, and it's called, if you search it under TED Talks, What I Learned from 100 Days of Rejection. It was very interesting. It was a guy who, for various reasons, he discovered that he was being held back in life because of his fear of rejection. And so he decided to embark on this thing of 100 days of rejection, where he was going to seek out rejection every day for 100 days, and so desensitize himself. And it was silly things that he said to himself. I mean, day one, apparently, he said to himself, right, I'm going to ask a complete stranger to lend me $100. And he said he went downstairs to his office and the big burly security guard and said to him, hey, buddy, can you lend me $100? And the guy, quite rightly, turned around and went, no, but immediately said, what is it for? Anyway, he said he was so embarrassed, and he kind of, yeah, of course, and sort of ran off. But part of his challenge was he was going to film each encounter. And so when he was watching it back, of course, what struck him was the guy, of course, said no. But the guy also said, well, what is it for? And he was struck by the caringness, the sort of thing of like, well, hang on, but if I'd stayed, how much further could I have taken that? If I had won him over with the cause for the home, would the guy have given it to me? That's incredible. And then he carries on, and one of the big things he learns is exactly that. If you just stay and sit in the discomfort just for a second, it actually turns out okay. And what he discovered, of course, in each scenario, and it's quite interesting to hear, he mentions 3 or 4, he doesn't mention all 100, is that actually everybody actually wants to help you. It's just sometimes you catch them on a moment where it doesn't suit them. So you might be met with a bit of animosity, but sometimes also what you're offering isn't, or what you're suggesting doesn't suit them. Like, this guy's not going to give you $100, but he's interested to know, gosh, maybe I can help you in a different way.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite interesting. It's basically, with any fear, is to just sit in that discomfort. And it's easier said than done, I know. And just figure out, what exactly am I worried about finding out here, So in his case, he was worried about the rejection, but he sort of learned that, well, it's not me per se they're rejecting, it's what I've suggested that doesn't suit them.
Yeah.
And I think you can apply that to any fear. And I've just started just thinking about things in my own life and considering that. But really interesting one to watch. What I learned from 100 Days of Rejection.
I shall definitely watch that, because I do see it in my clients. They perceive situations in a really specific way, and it's usually whatever reflects badly on them as human beings. So that might be a recommender.
Yeah, because it's also the insecurity that you've approached the situation with, that you then decide, oh my God, see, they've seen that, they know I'm being ridiculous. Which, no, have a look.
That sounds like a really good. TED Talks are just absolutely brilliant. So I often recommend, I keep notes of the ones that I really like, and if they're going to be helpful, then I do recommend to my clients. So thank you very much indeed, Rochelle. I really
Thank you, Trisha. Yeah.
She's made time today very, very early, because she's so busy as a person, and I can see exactly why. So thank you very much indeed. I do hope you've enjoyed it just as much as I have. If you have, do please like and share, and maybe give some of your own fitness tips or stress management tips below. And if you haven't subscribed already, do that too. Take care now.